LGBTQ and civil rights activists are promising to put up a fight after that New York Times report we told you about yesterday that says the Trump administration is considering a move that would, in effect, roll back protections for transgender people. It would narrowly define gender as male or female based on genitalia at birth. One actress and activist, Laverne Cox, has taken that fight to Twitter, pushing her followers to show up next month and vote. The Orange is the New Black star also writing, quote, "In the face of this affront on my existence and the existence of my community, I choose love, not fear. We exist and always have." Laverne Cox joins me now from Los Angeles. Laverne, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Good morning, Hallie. Thank you so much for having me.
So I had a chance to ask President Trump about this as he left the White House for Houston yesterday. Here's that interaction. Mr. President, what about your promise to protect transgender Americans? Are you giving up on that?
We're looking at it. We have a lot of different
looking at redefining
concepts right now. They have a lot of different things happening with respect to transgender right now. You know that as well as I do, and we're looking at it very seriously.
But what about your promise to protect the LGBTQ
I'm protecting
community?
everybody.
Americans,
you know what I'm doing? I'm protecting everybody. I want to protect our country.
Laverne, do you believe in any way the president is trying to protect transgender Americans?
I've learned, Hallie, not to really listen to anything that our president says, but I prefer to look at what the administration is doing. And from day one, the administration has attacked trans people. They've rolled back protections for transgender children in schools when 78% of transgender youth are bullied and harassed in schools. The president has attempted to ban transgender people from the military. Two appellate courts have held that trans people have a right to serve in the military. And this latest memo is an example of what the administration is doing. So I think it's important to look at what the administration is doing and not what they're saying. And I also want to say that it's been a really difficult past few days for transgender people all over this country and for the people who love us. And I think it's important for us to hold each other close and tight and to really embrace love and not fear. They want to make us afraid, but we need not be afraid. This policy has not been implemented yet. We can fight it. We can fight.
So on that, it's interesting you bring up the concept of fear here, because the Washington Post had a piece out from somebody believed to be the only openly elected transgender Republican, 27-year-old Jordan Evans, who tells the Post she's afraid for people who are younger than me, people who don't have the kind of experiences in the world that I've had. They see this and they're rightfully terrified. Talk about what specifically is at stake here for the transgender community.
Well, in the effort to redefine gender in a binary way, in a codified way, it's about legislating transgender people out of existence. But I think it's important for people to know that this is not anything new. Over the past 3 years in state legislatures all over the country, over 100 pieces of legislation have been introduced in state legislatures, basically trying to excommunicate transgender people from public life. But we have fought those battles and we have won. Earlier this year in Anchorage, Alaska, the citizens of Anchorage said that we do not support discriminating against transgender people. And next month in Massachusetts, the citizens of Massachusetts have an opportunity to do the same thing by voting yes on 3. And everyone who knows someone in Massachusetts can say, call your friends and say, vote yes on 3 to send a message to this administration and send a message to your fellow Americans that this kind of discrimination is not who we are and it will not stand.
So here we are 2 weeks out from the midterms. You are saying, hey, get out there and fight. You make the point, and we can pull it up here, of what this administration has done when it comes to rolling back transgender protection. So, for example, signing a directive banning those transgender military recruits. Attorney General Jeff Sessions deciding a civil rights law does not protect transgender workers from essentially employment discrimination. Rescinding protections for transgender students that has allowed them to use bathrooms that match their gender identity. So, in these next 2 weeks, and frankly, Laverne, over the next 2.5 years, talk to me about how you're going to use your platform. You're one of the most visible transgender Americans in this country. How do you help motivate people to make change in the way that you're describing?
Well, I think people need to be aware of what's going on, first of all. So I was only made aware of the Yes on 3 initiative in Massachusetts last week. So I'm heading to Massachusetts tomorrow to get the word out that folks need to vote yes on 3 in Massachusetts. And we need to be aware that in state legislatures all over the country, folks are continually trying to introduce legislation banning transgender people from public life. We can change our policies in our schools and our local municipalities and just support transgender people and send a message to our our administration, to our elected officials, that this is not who we are.
You seem optimistic, Laverne. Is that a fair assessment?
I am optimistic because over and over again, the courts have held that transgender people are covered by Title IX and Title VII. Earlier this year, the Amy Stevens case upheld that I think it was the Sixth Circuit, that transgender people are covered by Title VII. Ash Whitaker's case also upheld that transgender people are covered by Title IX. So we've won in the courts repeatedly, and the citizens of Anchorage, when they listened to the lived experiences of trans people, said that we do not want to support discrimination against these people. They want to fearmonger and say that transgender people are not who we say we are. And ultimately, we just want to go to work. We want to go to school safely. We want to live the American dream, and everyone should have the right to do that. And that's what I believe in. I'm a proud American, and I believe in the possibilities of this country. My life would not be possible if it were not for America. So that's why I'm hopeful. And I think if we all come together and support transgender folks, and we also have to support people of color, women, undocumented folks. We have to keep supporting each other and go out and vote November 6th.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.